Happy Friday. On today's stream, we're going to be talking about x402, which is a brand new standard for internet native payments that was released on May 6th, earlier this week, by the Coinbase team with partnership from Anthropic, one of the biggest LLM providers building Claude, AWS, the biggest computation platform where everybody's hosted their web apps, Base, Cal.com, Chainlink, Circle, Naynar, massive list of companies that are rolling out x402. The TLDR is that Coinbase launched x402, which is a payment protocol that enables instant stablecoin payments directly over HTTP. It allows APIs, apps, and AI agents to transact seamlessly, unlocking a faster and automated internet economy. What we're going to be doing today is going through a deep dive on how this works for builders. So if you've been seeing people talk about it, but they haven't been diving into the code, this is going to be your getting started guide. We're going to show you how I clone the repo, how I run it locally, how I deploy it onto Vercel, and how we can test using x402 on a deployed link that we will set up and host for free. So if you are a builder and you want to get started using x402, this video is for you. We're going to get started with what is x402. We'll dive into the docs and we'll look at what the HTTP response is for 402. What is the problem that x402 is solving? We'll look at the buyer side, the seller side, and the facilitator side. After we wrap up what is x402, we'll go into a demonstration where I'll show you the official demonstration that I've hosted, as well as a new demonstration built by Lincoln Murr, the founder of AgentKit, and his demonstration using AI agents to use x402 to make payments. After that, I'll guide you, and that's when we'll get into the actual code demo. I'll clone the official next example. We'll run it locally. We'll then host it on Vercel. We'll deploy it on Vercel, get a link that we can share, test it out, make sure everything works. And then we'll make some changes. We'll change up the price so that way I can show you how you can change the price if you want to change the price for your API endpoints, as well as the success content. Let's say you're neutro and you're running classes and you want to put a payment wall in front of the classes for people to be able to access it. Let's change up some of the content to put different content behind the paywall. So that way we can show you if you're an artist or you're a musician or you're an independent just shop that wants to put content behind an API paywall. How do I change the price? How do I change the content? And after that, we'll go into the enablement phase. We'll see how much time we have to see if we can do bigger customizations. Because my long-term goal that I want to be doing is I want to update in process to make it so you can buy art on chain using x402 instead of having to directly visit the website or go directly to the protocol. An API layer is missing as an ability to make payments. Yeah, you can go straight to the web interface. Yeah, you could go straight to the protocol. AI agents can't really visit a web interface too well. AI agents can do protocol things, but it's often best if there's a wrapper of an API layer. And so x402 is going to be perfect for us to build out an API layer that allows any AI agent or any other dev that wants to build on top of this payment infrastructure to be able to interact with the protocols and the apps that I'm building using x402 as the payment layer. The other app that will enable you to show is Recoup, which is the AI agent that I've been building for the music industry. And what we've been thinking through is how can we do proper billing for the tokens that people are using when they interact with the chat or when they're using our AI agents. Before we were thinking of using Stripe, and that's what we've been using up until this point is Stripe. With x402, we're going to add on a new layer of payments for directly at the API layer, adding in x402 for stablecoin payments. So that way it gives people who are using Recoup another option. It also enables AI agents to directly leverage Recoup. And so without any further ado in this Yap sesh, let's jump into what is x402. To answer that, we'll start with their big announcement, and then we'll go into the docs. So let me do a little bit of reorientation. I'm going to pull up the docs over here. Let me also make sure that I share this live stream with the Coinbase team so that they can amplify it if they would like. Copy this link, send it to the CDP team. Live with the little green circle so that they know that we're live. And if you're also just tuning in, please don't forget to like and repost this so that more people can get an actual hands-on example of how they can be building on x402. And so like I already read through this TLDR, x402 is a payment protocol. It's open and permissionless. You don't need any sort of API keys. The internet economy has always struggled with payments. We'll read through this first paragraph. Traditional payment rails like credit cards, bank transfers, and subscriptions were built for a pre-internet world. They're slow, expensive, geographically limited, and riddled with manual steps. As digital interactions have scaled, payments have lagged behind, fragmented, sluggish, and hard to program. There's a need for a more modern approach, one that supports autonomous AI agents, the rise of stablecoins, and generally enables instant, frictionless payments native to the internet itself. Recently, Citi called this era the GPT moment for payments, and AI16Z labeled it the WhatsApp moment for stablecoins, reflecting a growing consensus that the world is ready for payment rails as seamless and global as the web itself. Going into why it matters, legacy payments weren't built for today's fast, global, and automated internet. They're slow and expensive, yada, yada. X402 solves this by restructuring the HTTP 402 payment required status code, a dormant feature of the web designed for seamless payment requests within standard HTTP interactions. Now, clients, whether they're humans, scripts, AI agents, can respond to payment prompts using widely used stablecoins, making transactions as effortless as loading a web page. Here is how it works. We'll read it through, and then we'll look at this nice diagram. One, a client requests access to an x402 enabled HTTP server with a resource that it needs. So like, I need to get this page, I need to get this API, I need to get this service. I'm making a request to an HTTP server. This could be a web page, this could be an API service, anything that is making HTTP requests. Everything on the internet is already making these. This is normal. The entire internet runs on these HTTP server requests. The server replies with, hey, you need to make a payment, 402. This is normal. This has already existed on HTTP for a long time, but up and until this point, there was no mechanism to actually complete that payment. We just replied with, hey, you have to make a payment. Now with x402, we also include the payment details, the price and the accepted tokens. The client then sends the signed payment payload using the supported token like USDC, using a standard HTTP header. So the client says, okay, I see your payment info. Here is me making that signed payment. So that way you have the payment that I'm making. Step 4, the client then retries the request, now including the payment information with the encoded payment payload. The facilitator then verifies and settles the payment on chain and fulfills the request. After that, the server returns the requested data to the client, included the payment response header confirming the success. Note that at no point did I have to pay gas. I'm just signing a message. And then the facilitator actually does the on-chain transaction, making anytime I want to do these payments gas-free. And so I don't need to have any sort of payment tokens like ETH in my wallet. The facilitator handles the actual signing of the transactions. All that we are doing on the client side whenever I want to make the payment is I'm signing a payload, I'm signing a message that gives access to using that information, but the person who actually executes that on the server side, the facilitator is then used to actually settle the on-chain payment. Let's look at it in a little bit more visual fashion. Let me see if I can open this up in a new tab. Maybe it might give us a little bit higher quality. Okay, so the first thing I do is a client. A client can be an AI agent. A client can be a human visiting a website. A client can be another application that is making an API request. Client is a generic term for like the person that wants to request information or the entity that wants to request information. I say, hey, we'll keep the example of Neutro going. Give me Neutro's latest workshop. Give me access to that workshop. Neutro's server then responds and says, hey, we do have that workshop. However, you have to make a payment first, sending back the 402 information. The client receives that 402 information. The client can then select the payment method and payload. If you're on a web app, this might be where you open up a transaction to show the wallet. On a backend server, this might be where you sign a message using Coinbase API keys, or using VM to sign a payload, or using any library you want to create that payment information. No API keys are required to create that payment information. You then request the information again, including the encoded payload. The server then verifies with the facilitator, hey, we got this information. Can you verify that this payment is successful using the payment information? It replies verifying, saying, yep, we verified it. And now it's going to fulfill the request. The server, okay, we verified it. Now please complete that payment. The facilitator then completes the payment. It settles it on chain, submits the transaction with the signature to the USDC contract in order to transfer the USDC from the client's wallet, where we selected those payment methods, to wherever the server is configured that those payments go. The transaction gets confirmed to the facilitator. The facilitator passes that settled transaction back to the server, and then the server finally responds and says, great, we've settled your payment. We have confirmed that we have received your payment. Here is the content that you requested. In this case, the class from Neutro. So the client makes two requests. We say initially first, give me the information. I received the payment details I need to make. Let me make another request, including the signed payment information. The server does a bunch of stuff. The server will tell me, hey, here's the payment information you need. And if I make a request with that payment information, it then interacts with the facilitator in order to settle that payment using the signed info. And then the server eventually responds with the content that was requested. Let's keep moving through with all of this info. So far, we have talked about, well, we haven't looked at the HTTP request yet. So let's look at HTTP 402. 402 and other status codes. Just briefly, when you make an API request, there are, let me just look at generic HTTP codes. HTTP response codes. Whenever you interact with an API, you send a request, and then the API will send back a status code as well as the information for those responses. And so in general, from a high level, 100 response codes are informational, 200 are success messages, 300 are redirect, 400s are errors, and 500s are servers. We are focused exclusively on those 400 errors, client errors. And so if we can drill into that more, there was this great map that I used to find. It might be here, or it might be that Umbraco light right below. Here we go. So these are the 400 client errors. These have existed forever. 402 is already here. It's not like W3 schools had to go and update recently because of the new x402 announcement. This 402 already existed. And as you can see, it says reserved for future use. And so for the entire history of the internet, up and until today, this response has existed, payment required, but nobody has actually implemented it to actually be used. That's what's so groundbreaking and transformational about this, is that we're using an existing HTTP response and we're finally giving a way to use it. Everybody has been documenting this forever. Everybody's familiar with a 404. This is a page that you hit when it's not found. Let me show you an example of a 404. I was just looking at one in my code example for my facilitator. If you try to go to a facilitator, which I've got in my env local, if you try to visit this page, you'll see a 404 error. And so here's an example of me making a request. Hey, give me this page. The page replies back, this page doesn't exist. 404, the asset does not exist. And so these responses are very common in API requests and HTTP requests, and they've existed for the entire history of the internet. This one is very special. This is payments on the internet. And up and until today, for the entire history of the internet, payments have never been enabled on the internet. What x402 unlocks is it's finally adding an actual capability to accept payments directly using HTTP requests on the internet. This is foundational for the internet. The internet has always known that it can accept payments, but up and until today, it's always been reserved for future use. Let's kick that can down the road. Somebody in the future will figure out how we can actually accept payments using HTTP responses on the internet. That's what's so awesome about this. We are finally adding functionality to the internet. So that is what HTTP is. That is what this 402 response is. It is the actual ability for the internet to accept payments using HTTP requests. The problem, as we've already talked about up and until this point, is why hasn't anybody already built in a payment required actual use case? Well, let's think about what existed before this. You could use Stripe, you could use PayPal, you could use Cash App, you could use, what are the other payment providers that you're already familiar with using? If I want to use Stripe, what do I need? I need an API key. If I want that API key, I need to do KYC. If I want to do KYC, I probably need to have a passport. How many people have a passport? Not everybody on the planet, that's for sure. Next example, PayPal. If you want to use PayPal, you need to set up an account. If you want to set up an account, you need to verify your bank credentials. If you want to verify your bank credentials, you need to have a bank account. How many people on planet Earth do not have a bank account? All of these things are limited. All of the current payment infrastructure on the internet is limited, and you need a KYC. It's not accessible to the global population. You need to set up an API key, and it just adds friction to the overall experience. And the biggest thing is it's permissioned and owned by some central entity. And so it's not an open standard that anybody can use. Anything up and until this point is a very centralized and custom solution. We need, for the internet exists on a global scale. The internet exists for everybody, whether you have a bank account or you don't, whether you have a passport or you don't, whether you're 80 years old or whether you were just born yesterday. We need the internet to work for every single person on the planet. And so if we want it to work for every single person on the planet, we can't have API keys be a benchmark for that. And so that's been, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems that has prevented the 402 response from being able to have an example up and until this point. So we've talked about the HTTP. This has been a response that has always existed. This is not something new. This is just someone has finally gone and made a solution for this. We finally have a new standard for internet native payments. Let's go into the details. Now that we understand 402 has always existed, this is not something new. The problem has been every type of payment infrastructure before this has required an API key or KYC, or it's not accessible or totally open to the global internet, everybody that uses HTTP, humans and non-humans like AI agents. Now we do have something that works for anybody, anywhere globally, whether you're a human, whether you're from the USA, from Argentina, from India, or any country in between, whether you're a human or a non-human, you can now do payments on the internet. And so let's go into the details of the three sides of accepting payments on the internet. Let's go to x402.org, I believe is the website. The official website for x402, the protocol, is x402.org. And inside of the docs, they outline the three different parties inside of a transaction. We already saw them over here, and they were outlined in this little flow chart. I'll open this up again on the new tab just to highlight these three parties that we're going to be diving into. There's the buyer, which is the client. There's the seller, which is the server. And there's the facilitator, who is actually the intermediary between the buyer and seller and actually executing on-chain transactions. And so if you're a buyer, all that you need is a crypto wallet. It can be on any network. And right now it's USDC, but this works with any payment, not just USDC. You need to have Node.js, and you need to have a service that you're trying to pay for that is already accepting x402. They've got a bunch of examples, open source on GitHub for you to be able to fork. We'll dive into those examples in a little bit, but for now, let's focus on what it actually looks like. So you install the dependencies. Axios and Fetch are the most common libraries for making HTTP requests. And so you just download these packages, and then you'll use Fetch and Axios the same way you would normally use them. You then need to set up whatever wallet it is that's going to be making those signatures. If you have access to that wallet, you can use the private key, or if you're building an app, like what I'm going to be showing in a little bit, you can have someone connect their wallet externally, and so you don't need their private key. This is the actual important part. When you're building an app, you always need to make requests, and you're going to be using Fetch. You're going to fetch a URL, like a get URL, to make that request. The difference is we're now fetching and passing in an account. And so unlike before, we were just fetching a URL and there was no ability to make payments, by attaching an account into this payment, now whenever we make the request, the account can sign a message and it can approve those funds and it can approve whatever is being requested. And so by passing in the account, we have passed in a mechanism for the API request itself to make the payment. It has an account, it has a digital wallet where it knows its balance, it knows how much US dollars it has, it knows how much it's allowed to spend, what its allowance is in order to spend, and it has all the capabilities to actually sign the permissions, the authorizations for that payment to happen. And so if you're a buyer, this is the bulk of what you need to do. Whenever you make an API request, just like you normally would, you're just going to pass in an account, and then you're going to handle the API request just like you normally would. You make a GET request, you wait for the response, you get the body from that response, and then you can decode the payment response, and you can pull out that payment info. You can pull out that payment info if you want access to that payment info. So that's the buyer side. On the buyer side, you make an HTTP request and you pass in an account so that if there's a payment that is needed, the API can already go and execute that payment without you needing to go and take extra steps to set up an API key, get the funds from somewhere else, do anything outside of the HTTP request. This happens instantly and immediately with the normal fetch or Axios or whatever the library is where you're normally making your HTTP requests. You're just going to do that passing in an account so that it has that capability of making the payment. That's the buyer side. Let's move into the seller side. So if you want to make a purchase, you're just going to make your request and pass in an account using a library like Fetch 402 or Axios 402. But let's say you're watching this and you're a musician or you're an artist or you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, and you want to sell services behind a paywall using x402 for internet native payments. For you, what you need to do, it works with Express, which is a standard Node.js API framework. Next.js, which is my framework, it's a full stack front end and back end. Or Hono, which I'm actually not familiar with Hono's middleware, but it'll also work with Hono. And so you just install x402 for whatever the library is that you're using. And if you're doing a mainnet facilitator, you'll install this package. This is going to be optional because you can use whatever facilitator you want. This is the bulk of what we want to look at. Whatever your API endpoint is, you're going to add a middleware, and that middleware is going to intercept the request, check if the payment has been included, and if not, we're going to reply back with that payment information. And so in this case, we're not actually seeing a good response, but I think we can check out Twitter. Let me get a good example from Twitter so that way we can see an actual response of the API. For sellers, there was an example where they were showing the weather and showing how that API can actually respond with the weather. Maybe it's here. Here it is. Okay, here's that example with the weather. And so let's say your API endpoint, this is a normal Express API endpoint, /weather, it's going to return the weather. This is how your API currently looks. If you're selling something, you have this type of API endpoint where you get a request, you send back the response, nothing happens in the middle. If you want to accept payments for that, let's say you're Neutro and you have a workshop that you're selling online, or you have a course that you're selling online, and someone tries to land on your page to access that course. Currently, you're just sending back the course page and you're saying, here's all the lessons, watch those lessons. Cool, continue with browsing my course website. With x402, you're just going to add in this payment middleware that comes from the x402 library. And inside of this middleware, you pass in where should the payment go. So put in your wallet, just put in your digital wallet. That way the payments are going to your wallet. You specify which endpoints apply for this, in this case, getting of the weather. And for each of those endpoints, what's the payment information? If I want to access the course from Neutro, how much does it cost? And on what network do I want to accept this on? Additionally, the seller configures the facilitator. And so the seller says, this is some external facilitator that can settle this payment. And so right now, the announcement is for Base and Base Sepolia. And so the official facilitator is for Base and Base Sepolia. But if you say, I don't like Base. I want to do it on Solana. Or I don't like that it's on chain. I'm Stripe and I want to do all this off chain. Just build a new facilitator. This is what we'll talk about next. The facilitator is some random arbitrary third party that settles that transaction however they want. It can be on chain, it can be off chain, it can be using Base, it can be using any other network. The facilitator is the role that's going to actually settle that. And the seller is the one who says who the facilitator is that they are choosing and trusting to be able to settle the payments that are happening when API requests are happening on their HTTP endpoints. So summarizing the seller is always doing this. This is normal for you. You set up an API endpoint. The difference is if you want to accept a payment, you just use the new x402 middleware. You use their payment middleware. You put in the details for payment. How much does my API endpoint cost? What network is it being settled on? And who is the facilitator who is actually going to settle that payment? Who is the facilitator that is going to settle that payment when the client sends me all the information to execute the payment? We've talked about buyer, we've talked about seller. Let's dive into quickly what is the facilitator. This to me feels like one of the opportunities for a new class of business that doesn't exist right now. If you're an entrepreneur and if you're thinking, wow, x402 is going to change everything, what is an untapped playing field that I can have an early advantage to and have a first mover advantage? My personal opinion is the facilitator. There's going to be a few of these facilitators on different networks, and we're going to need facilitators to support all the networks that people are going to want to transact on. For example, Solana is not supported right now. And if you're a fan of Solana and you're a fan of x402, you could build a facilitator service to facilitate these x402 payments on Solana. Or again, with Stripe, if you want to build using the Stripe API and you want to build a facilitator that facilitates Stripe payments, the facilitator makes it so that it's gas free. And the facilitator has a whole business model open to them of, okay, I am trying to get sellers to include me as a facilitator to settle payments. How can I make a valuable product offering, either by offering something that nobody else offers in the x402 landscape, or just offering a better service that's either settling faster or offering other bells and whistles that I'm not creative enough to think of on the fly right here? You can build this new business as a facilitator and offer your service to sellers, to businesses, creators, artists. And if you can get them to include your URL in to that request that we were showing into their usage as a seller of 402, you can potentially build a business that nobody else has thought of. And if you're creative and you can think of this, now's your time to strike and be a facilitator. The facilitator is an optional but recommended service that simplifies the process of verifying and settling payments between buyers and sellers. The facilitator is a service that verifies the payment payload that was submitted by the buyer, and then it settles the payments on chain on behalf of the seller. By using a facilitator, the seller does not need to maintain a direct blockchain connectivity or implement any payment verification logic themselves. This reduces the operational complexity and ensures accurate real-time validation of transactions. Again, the responsibilities are the facilitator verifies that the payments from the buyer is correct. It settles the payment on behalf of the seller, and then it provides all those responses so that the seller can communicate those successful payment details back to the buyer. How does the buyer work? There's a whole interaction flow. The client makes an HTTP request. The resource server responds with payment required. The resource server verifies. The facilitator server performs verification using a schema network ID. If the verification response is valid, the resource server performs the work to fulfill the request. And then if the verification response is invalid, the resource returns payment required. The facilitator submits a payment on chain based on the schema, and then it waits for the payment to be confirmed on chain. It then returns the payment details to the seller, and then the seller can respond to the buyer with the successful information. As you can see, unlike buyers and sellers, where we have very easy and clear-cut code examples, you notice in the facilitator, there's no code examples in here. It's vague details, but it's entirely creative and open for you, the entrepreneur, the creative, the artist, to go and figure out what does a facilitator look like? what will facilitators look like for internet native payments? And if you can define what this looks like, you can see that I don't have a definition for how to build a facilitator. There's nothing that I can copy and paste to do this. And so this is not well known. If you have an idea for how to build it, share it with us. Tell us how you're thinking of facilitating internet native payments. And you have an opportunity to define an industry that has yet to exist, but has been waiting, as you can see, for a long time. For the entire history of the internet, we've been waiting for people to figure this out, and we're just finally figuring it out. And so what we've talked about so far is we have talked about what is 402, what is the HTTP response. It's existed for the entire history of the internet. The problem is, up and until now, there's not been any sort of good payment facilitation on the internet. It's required API keys. It's been country specific. It's been highly centralized onto a single service. There hasn't been anything that's been open for any human or any actor, whether they're human or AI or otherwise, to use. We talked about buyers, the people who want to buy things using the new x402. We've talked about sellers, how you can sell something using x402. We've also just finished talking about facilitators, the people who handle the actual settlement of the payment from us that a seller wants to accept, and the seller has configured you as the person who facilitates the transactions. After all that, let's now go into the actual demonstrations. Let's now talk about some demonstrations for what does it actually look like to use x402. And to go through that, I've deployed the quick start at x402. What did I call it? x402 next example.vercel.app. I forked this from the official example. And so you can go to the official example at x402.org/protected. I forked that and I've hosted it on Next because I want to be able to show other builders how they can use x402. And so this is my forked version, the exact same as the official. You just go to the live demo. We try to visit an endpoint, but because we haven't submitted the payment information, the API replies back, hey, you still have to submit the payment information. And so we're presented with this screen, payment is required. We can see the network and the price and the token are all highlighted right here. And I'm also given a manner to pay for it by connecting my wallet. I've already connected my wallet. In this case, I'm using Phantom, but you can use any wallet that you want in order to make the payment to access the content. I'm going to get my Phantom password so that I'm already logged in. And now let's make that payment. So we tried to access this page. The page requires payment in order to access it. So let's make that payment so that way we can get behind the paywall. We click pay, it checks our balance. Now it's going to create that signature. In order to create the signature, it needs my wallet. So it opens up my wallet, and now my wallet's going to sign. We sign the transaction. This is not a transaction. It's just a message. I didn't have to pay any gas. Now the facilitator is facilitating that transaction on chain. And then finally, the response comes back, hey, successful. And so now I can actually see the content on the protected endpoint, which is a song. And so let's, again, go back to our Neutro example. Let's say Neutro is running a class, and Neutro sends out their link on Twitter and says, hey, you can now come and study on our new course. I click the link, I land on Neutro's page, and then the first thing I see, oh, you haven't made that payment. Please make the payment of a penny or whatever we decide to charge. Make that payment so that you can access the content. I click Connect Wallet. I make the payment, whatever my wallet is. It opens up my wallet. I make the payment. Neutro's backend API will then use a facilitator to settle that payment. And then once the payment is confirmed, I'm then granted access to the course. I can study everything that you're already used to with online classes. The only difference is we can now accept payments in an internet native mode, regardless of what your payment provider is, regardless of how much you want to charge. You don't need to do any KYC. You don't need any API keys. You just say, I want to accept payments. This is the facilitator I'm going to use. Boom, go ahead and charge at will. Neutro, you can accept payments however you want. Any artist, any business, anywhere in the world can now accept payments. This is one example. And you might be wondering, okay, This is kind of cool, but I had to connect a wallet here. How would this work for an AI agent? If it's an AI agent, there's not going to be a connect wallet button. And so how would it look if an AI agent is going to use X402? And for this, I'm glad that Lincoln, founder of OnChainKit, built this brand new project, I believe yesterday. Yeah, today's May 9th. So last night, less than 24 hours ago, Lincoln published a new side project. It's a shopping cart API that checks out with one line of code, no API keys, no credit card form, and it's just using payment responses with X402. Let's look at this example from the start. And I'm gonna mute him, but I'm gonna show the closed caption. Actually, there's no closed captions. And so you use the chat, you send in the start prompt, and then the chat replies back and says, hey, you want to buy the fluffy bear and the fluffy elephant? You're spending 10 cents. You've added those items to your cart. Here's my full cart. The total amount is going to be 10 cents. You click checkout. It then processes the payment with X402. You can see there was no pop-ups, no need to sign any transactions. We just made an API request, and then the API endpoint itself was able to process that transaction and then say, boom, your order's been placed. You're now going to get your items. The fastest way for us to be making payments on the internet is using X402. The information is then given. You can see that it was settled on chain 11 seconds ago. Again, we didn't need to sign anything. We didn't need to know anything about gas. He's now highlighting how it looks on the back end. The dummy store has a couple items inside of it. You can see the API endpoint a little bit further down. The add cart endpoint, the cart for any wallet address, getting the cart total. This is a normal business API backend. You need all these endpoints normally. The only difference is you can see now he's replying with X402s. He's creating exact payment requirements in the API response. So that way the client, the chat interface itself knows how much to charge and to send over from the account that the AI agent has. They're expecting payments. Let's see if we get into anything else. Checkout endpoint hit for the wallet, cart contents, cart total. He's got some logging in there before with the payment requirements. And then there's his Telegram bot handling the checkout. On the buyer side, it makes that fetch using the account. And so he just passes in his account. There you can see a local wallet is being used, which means that he has a private key hard-coded on his machine, makes that post request, and then sends the response after it makes the payment. And so this is an example of how to use an AI agent or an API endpoint or anywhere where you're not connecting a wallet in order to accept payments. So what have we done so far? We've talked about what is X402, talking about the HTTP response, the problem of API keys and agentic payments and standardization of internet native payments, the buyers, the sellers, the facilitators. We just went through the official demo from Coinbase. Then we went through the new demo that Lincoln just built, brand new as of yesterday. Now let's go into the actual building. You've made it this far. If you're watching this, you are interested in building internet native payments using X402. Let's go in and actually code out and deploy our own shop using X402. And to do that, we're going to start by going over to GitHub. On GitHub, you can start in multiple different places. You can click GitHub directly on x402.org, and that's going to take you to Coinbase's X402 repository for the official protocol deployment of X402. And inside of this repository, they have an examples folder where they have a ton of examples for you to try out X402. It'll highlight all the examples here. The agent example uses Anthropic's agent implementation with X402 fetch. The Axios example shows you how to use Axios Interceptor with 402 Axios. The fetch example shows you how to use X402 with fetch. MCP shows you how to build an MCP, a multi-chain protocol, or a model context protocol using X402. There's a facilitator example if you're interested in building a facilitator. And then the full stack example is Next. I like Next. For me, it's the fastest, easiest, and least expensive way for new builders to build and deploy applications that are full stack. And so this is the example that we're going to be using. There's also some server examples for Express and Hono. But again, we're going to be doing a full stack example. That's going to include the client. It's also going to include the server. And it's all in one single repository so that whether you're a buyer and you're interested in making payments, or if you're a seller and you're interested in listing for payments, the full stack example is going to give us both. If you're only interested in one side, you can just go into the servers, or you could just go into the clients. If server means seller, client means buyer. And so if the client and server term are confusing to you, you can think of a client as the buyer, the person who's making the purchase, and you can think of the server as the seller, the person who wants to sell an item using internet native payments with x402. In this example, we're going to be showing both using the next example. And so you could clone this and you'll get the full protocol with all the examples. I have already done the work of taking the specific Next.js example out, and I forked it into my own repository. And so if you're interested in that, you can go to github.com/sweetmentech/x402-next-example. I'm going to go ahead and crash the server that I have running, and I'm going to remove my existing one so that way we can start fresh. rm-r x402-example next. This is how I'm going to delete the existing example so that I can start fresh. Let's try to remove before I clone the new one. It's probably going to give me some prompts to say yes and no. There it is. Yep. Whole lot of yes. It's yes day. Okay. We've now deleted it. So if we try to cd into x402 example, next example, it's going to show us it doesn't exist. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click the code button, copy the URL, and let's clone it with git clone, paste in the repository. And this is going to give us the fresh repository to build on x402. We'll cd inside of it, and then we'll open up the code base. I use Cursor, but if you use VS Code or any other code editor, it doesn't matter. We're not going to be doing any vibe coding in this example. I just use Cursor all the time because for me, its auto prompt is top tier. All right, I should have it open. And so here is the repository. Let's talk through what this looks like briefly. We've got a README that highlights everything that you need to do. The overall project structure, this is a normal Next.js app. And so we have an app directory where we have the landing page. This is going to just be that normal landing page that we were looking at over here. This is that landing page. This is the landing page. This is the code for the landing page inside of page.tsx. You can see full stack demo powered by Next.js, full stack demo powered by Next.js. You've got the live demo button, which is right here. And then you have the footer. By using the site, you agree to the terms and conditions that nobody's reading, right down there with links to those terms if you ever decide you want to read them. That's the page. We also have a protected route. And inside of the protected route, we show the content that we want to give when someone visits that. And so when I go to protected, I should be seeing the class. I should be seeing the music. I should be seeing whatever content I'm trying to access. However, you might be saying, hey, I'm not seeing that on the page you're showing. I'm not seeing your payment was successful. I'm not seeing protected content. I'm seeing payment required. That's correct. That is because there is this middleware file, and this middleware file is what handles the x402 payments for the seller side. And so when I try to access /protected, we know that I have to pay a penny. And if I don't pay that penny, I shouldn't access the content. I should be told, hey, you still need to pay. And so that's what's happening when I visit here, is this middleware is getting triggered, which is returning back, you need to pay a penny on the network that we configured with base Sepolia. You got to make that payment. Yes. Let me make sure I'm looking at the actual version of this. I'm going to do cursor.slash one more time just to make sure I'm looking at the correct version, because I saw some console logs, which maybe I did push. But all right. Let's go through the README and set up this project and get it working. If you have any questions at any point, just send them in the chat. I'm actively watching and monitoring for comments. And if you have any questions, if I haven't explained anything well enough, just leave it here while I'm live and I'll be able to reply to it real time, not just for you, but for everybody else who's watching this video in the future to be able to get that question answered. Because if you have that question, someone else also most likely has that question. And now's a great time for you to get that question answered in real time, so that when you start to try to follow this example and build, you already have the answer in this video that I'm going through right now. First thing we need to do is copy our example file. It's actually incorrect. It says env.local, but their file is named env-local. So let's copy this, rename it to just .env. And the only thing that's missing from here is a resource wallet address. This is your seller wallet, which means where do you want to be getting paid? This is the only thing we need to provide, is you saying, where do you want to get paid? There's no API keys. There's no KYC. There's nothing else you need to set up. The only thing you have to do if you want to get this running is tell us, where do you want to get paid? Isn't that such a nice question to be asked? Usually when you're setting up like a Stripe payment or a credit card payment or any sort of Shopify website, there's a million API keys you got to put in, and none of those are where am I going to get paid to. It's all API keys and random stuff, and you got to go onto the Stripe website or the Crossmint website or the Shopify website to configure your bank account and all your KYC info, and that's where you're going to get paid. In this example, using x402, there's no complex API keys. There's no complex KYC. The only thing you have to do to get this repository up and running is tell us, where do you want to get paid? And so let me get that. I want to get paid in my Coinbase wallet. So I'll open up my Coinbase wallet. Copy my address, paste my address in. And that's all I got to do. We're now ready to go up and running. And I'll demo this here locally just to fully show it. But up and until now, I actually haven't been able to get it working locally. It's only worked on a deployed environment. That's a question I still have with the Coinbase team, but we won't focus on it much because I'm already talking with the Coinbase team about it. Let's install the packages. We'll use pnpm-i to install the packages. And then we will start with pnpm-dev. So first we install our packages. And while this is installing, now let's take it step by step. We're doing great on time. We got about 13 minutes left. We've already talked about what is x402. We've already done a demonstration. And now we're into the guiding part of showing you how to set up x402 for the first time in a local Next.js project. The only other things we want to do after this is we're going to deploy it onto Vercel so that way you can see it hosted for free. You're hosting your shop for free, no API keys, no payments required. And then we'll try to change it up just to go into the finer details, the advanced stuff, which is a stretch goal. It's optional. We'll get there if we have enough time, but if we run out of time, that's fine. Let's run our repository locally. I use pnpm. If you don't like pnpm or you're not unfamiliar, you can use npm or yarn, and it'll work just fine. Our app should now be running at localhost 3000. Let's visit it. It's compiling, and once it finishes compiling, we should see all the code that we're running locally running. All that we did to get this code is we have cloned it from GitHub, added in where we want to get paid, and we installed the packages. That's it. If you don't know how to code, you could vibe code this using Cursor or using V0, and it's going to work. Here's our landing page. It's running locally. Let's go into the live demo. The live demo button takes us over to the protected page. So right now it's trying to compile the protected page, or it should be trying to compile the protected page. And then it should be using that middleware to say, does this request include the payments header? And if the answer is no, it's going to send back. Okay, you can see it logged out where I said I want the payment, and it logged out my network. And now instead of getting the content I wanted, it's saying you have payment that's required. I'm going to try this once to see if it's working. My gut is this is not going to work because it has not been working for me locally up and until this point. But we'll give it another shot, see if it's going to work this time. If it doesn't work locally, that's fine because it works when we deploy it. So why it's not working locally, I'm not sure, but it will work when we deploy it. So I'm mostly testing just to do this example all the way up, do it end to end. But if you see that it doesn't work locally, don't freak out. I've seen the same thing, and hopefully the Coinbase team is working on that. So we log into whatever the wallet is that you choose. In this case, I choose Phantom. We're sending a message. This isn't a transaction. I don't need to have ETH in my wallet. This is a message. I confirm it. And so the buyer is now saying, yep, the API endpoint is now requesting the content. It's now using the facilitator to try to settle that payment on chain. And then the facilitator, for some reason, is replying with internal server error. I'm getting this error of Axios network error. I'm not entirely sure. But again, I'm fine with this because all that I need to do is I can just say Vercel. In one command, Vercel, I'm going to set up and deploy a new project. I'm going to put it in my own projects. I don't want it to link to an existing project. I would like it to create a new project, and I'm just going to call this x402 live demo because this is me doing it live. It's located right there. I'm not going to modify any settings. And now it's deploying our code on Vercel entirely for free. If you're unfamiliar with Vercel, Vercel is my favorite place to be hosting web applications. They don't pay me anything, but it is entirely free, and I don't pay them anything. And so I'm hyping them up because they give me a platform that I can use for free. And I like sharing this with everybody globally because whether you're in Argentina or in India or in any country around the globe, if you don't have any money and you want to host, don't go to GoDaddy. Don't go to these other sites where you're going to have to pay. Go to Vercel because you can host. They give you a domain for free. It's incredibly easy to set up. They've got a top tier team, and I like Vercel. They also built Next.js, and so they built the programming language. They built the place where you can host it. They're also the creators of V0, the top app to do vibe coding. AI frameworks for hosting infrastructure. The Vercel team's great. And so now we're live. Let's try our demo again. We'll open up, they gave us this free link, x402 live demo.vercel.app. Let's go to the live demo. Takes us over to the protected page. The protected page is throwing an error right now because I don't have my payment information in here. Let's verify by going to the logs, and it should be telling me unsupported network of undefined. We're missing our environment variables. To fix this, go back to the project, go into your settings, go to the environment variables section, and then from here, let's paste our environment variables. Just Command A to copy it all, Command C to copy, go back to your environment variables, select the first input field and paste, and it's going to format it all exactly as we need. This is going to include our facilitator, the network, and where we want to get paid. Click Save, so that way we save those missing environment variables. Go back to the Deployments tab, and I actually don't have a button to create a new deployment, so I'll just go back into my command line, and I'll say Vercel again. Oh, whoops. I think I actually need to say Vercel _prod, if I remember right. Deploying. Okay, and now we have a new queued deployment for main. And this is a production deployment. So this is for the production environment. It's doing a new build. I have to do this build again because I've updated the environment variables. And so the first build was successful, but when we tried to purchase, we got an error. We've now updated our environment variables, and now we're redeploying so that way the new version of this deployment is going to have the environment variables. We can use the same URL. I don't need to change where I'm actually going to go to try to make the purchase. Once this deployment finishes, I'll just refresh the page and then it'll work again. No extra changes needed. So we'll be patient. It's already almost done. I'm going to get another sip of tea and then it should be live and ready for us to test it out. I wasn't even able to finish pouring my hot water. We're ready to go. Refresh the page. And instead of seeing an error, we should now see it sent the request for the page. We were missing payment. And so now it's asking us, please make that payment. I'll connect my wallet. It opens up my wallet. I'm going to use Phantom. I hope you don't ask me for a password. My Phantom pop-up is on my second screen. So if you can't see it, it's because it's on my second screen. I just connected. I clicked connect. And now it should have my wallet. I can now make the payment. We create the payment signature. And when I sign this, we should then be granted access successfully to view the content. When we tried this locally, we got back an internal server error. But when we deploy it, it's using the facilitator to settle that payment. And then when the payment finishes, we unlock the content. This is on our own version. I didn't need API keys. I didn't need to go through and KYC. All that I had to do was use Vercel to deploy for free and then set the environment variables of what's the network I want to get paid on, what's the address I want to get paid out to, and who is facilitating the transaction. And outside of that, it's working. We now have a live shop where we can send customers to. Those customers can try to access whatever the content is that we're trying to sell, whether it's a course from Neutro or the latest art from Latasha or an AI chatbot from Recoup. We can send back, hey, you have to make a payment. X402 handles the rest of facilitating and handling that payment. And then we serve the content just like we normally do. Now that we've cloned it locally and we've deployed it onto our own custom URL that we can share with our friends and customers, let's try changing a couple things about this to really just go into the final details before I wrap up. The two things I'm going to try to change is I'm going to try to change the price and I'm going to try to change the success content. So let's try changing the price first. To change the price, I'll go into the middleware and let's say a penny's great, but I'd like to receive 10 cents instead of 1. Let's change this to 10 cents. And actually, I like angel numbers, so we'll make it 11 cents to give us double ones. And just to give us one more one, I'm going to make it $1.11. Now it's expensive. It's $1.11. We'll go over to our Git. Actually, I'm not using Git right now. I'm just using Vercel. So I don't know why it's not opening on this screen. I want my terminal on this screen. Stop opening on that screen. Okay, it's on a different screen. Just know that I'm sending Vercel. I send the text Vercel. It's going to do another deployment. It's uploaded my content, and now we're deploying it again. I'm not testing this locally because, again, when I try to test locally, we get internal server error. And so each time I'm making a change for now, I'm going to deploy it because just to keep this demo fully functioning. When this deploys, what we should see as a difference is currently, when I try to visit the protected page, I am charged 1 penny. What I expect to happen is when this deployment finishes, the payment required should automatically update to show $1.11 being what's required. While I'm waiting for this, I'm going to get the new content. Right now, when I make the payment, I am shown a song that I didn't make from Dan Kim and Eric Reppel, two of the leads on the Coinbase team who have been building out X402. They're also musicians, so multi-talented builders on the Coinbase team. I just want to show it if I can. Confirm, payment goes through the facilitator, the server gets back that the payment was successful, my content gets unlocked, and right now I'm getting back this SoundCloud embed with content. I want to change this up to be this live stream that I'm doing right now. Let's see if I can get this live stream and put this live stream as the content that gets unlocked after I pay the new payment of $1.11. I'll head over to my YouTube page to find the content that I'm going to unlock. And then here is my live stream that I'm at live right now. And so we'll get a little bit of inception, self-referencing content. Here is that live stream. Should be able to pause it so that I'm not hearing myself. And then maybe I have a share button where I can get an embed. I just want to make sure that I'm not getting the audio playing, but while it's loading, I guess I can go back and see if the deployment's done. It looks like our deployment's finished. So let's go back to visiting our live app at x402-live-demo.vercel.app. Go to the live demo, and now it's still showing 1 penny. I'm confused as to why it's showing 1 penny when I've updated it to $1.11. Let me see if that's being referenced anywhere else. Okay, I've updated it to be $1.11, but I'm still seeing a penny here. I'm going to do a hard refresh just to see if this is being cached. And maybe one more thing I can try is going to one of the actual new deployment links. I'm wondering if this API endpoint is being cached and if it's not giving me the latest information on the payment that is required. If this does not update the price as expected, we'll move on to the final step of changing the content that shows up behind the paywall, because that I do know where it lives inside of the code base. And I'm confident, even though I haven't done it yet, I'm confident we can make the change to get the right content showing. Let's go into the live demo and see if we can get a new deployment URL. So that way it's not cached like what we're seeing currently. The error is likely that I didn't do it in production. So all that I need to do is promote to production. It's likely going to need to do a little bit more redeploying. That was my bad. I said Vercel instead of Vercel /prod, and so my changes were never pushed to the production environment. What we can do though, because we don't care if it's on production or not, is I can go back into here and I can go to this specific link. And on this link, I have to authenticate, unfortunately, because it's a preview domain, not the production domain. But on here, we should see $1.11. So this is the correct payment information. We're now being prompted to pay $1.11. Let's connect our wallet, pay $1.11, and then we'll see the content. And after that, we'll add in our new YouTube video content. And after that, we'll wrap up this video talking about how I'm thinking about 402 and how I'm going to start building it into my production applications. Connect my wallet. It asks me to sign. We do that little sig. Connect the wallet. Now that we're connected, we can pay. We can see it's $1.11 this time. Creating payment is going to open up our wallet and prompt us to sign a message, no transaction. But let me see if I can verify the amount in here. Here's that value of $1.11. It's got a whole bunch of zeros after it, but this is the amount. I confirm that authorization, and now the facilitator is going to facilitate that transaction of $1.11. And now I have access to that SoundCloud content. That's the price of any item. If you want to update the price of anything that you're selling in your middleware for whatever the endpoint is that you want to change the price on, just change the price in human readable pricing. And that is all you got to do to update the price. Cool, we've updated the price. If you're a seller and you're interested in changing the price, you now know you just got to change that price. If you want to change the successful content, we will go over to the page itself. So there's this protected page. And on the protected page, it is doing an embed. And it's using that embed right there. Let's see if I can add on. Let's try to share this. And let me see if I can copy the embed. embed. Let's copy it. And now that I've copied it, let's update this div. Do I want this div or do I want get rid of the div? I think I want to get rid of the div and the iframe. And let's put in my new iframe. It doesn't like frame border. It wants frame border with a capital B. And it wants referral policy and allow full screen. We have now fixed all the build errors, even though frame border is deprecated. We'll delete the deprecation. And now I've opened up my terminal and I'm saying Vercel --prod to create a new build. Now we have updated we've updated the successful payment. It's still saying enjoy this banger song, but it'll now be my live YouTube video is what we should see on successful deployment. Let me close out of some of these tabs as we're starting to get close to the finish of this episode. This is your last chance. If you have any questions, ask them inside of the live stream so that way you can get your question answered while I'm here live. If you don't get it answered now, you can obviously send it to me afterwards. But sending it now gets it included in this video for any other person who has the same question as you to get it answered. So I highly encourage you to leave a question in the live chat. Let's check out if we are now getting $1.11 with our YouTube video for the shop that we have set up. We've set up shop. We can confirm it's charging us $1.11. We connect our wallet. I think my wallet should already be connected. Ooh, it's switching us over to my Coinbase wallet this time. I love when random wallets get used. Sure, please use Coinbase wallet. I like how Phantom doesn't prompt to use Coinbase wallet and Coinbase wallet does not prompt to use Phantom. Both of them just prompt to use MetaMask. Now I've connected my USDC wallet. I actually don't know if I have testnet USDC here, so let's try making the payment and see if it fails. It looks like I do not have any USDC. And so let me get some test USDC inside of this wallet so that way I can actually make this payment. Open up my wallet, copy my wallet address. Now I go over to the testnet faucet, swap the network for base Sepolia, put in my address, and ask for some USDC. We should have just gotten those tokens. Let me try paying again. Okay, so currently I still don't have, oh, it's trying again. Nope, still no. We're gonna keep checking until we get it. Maybe I need to do a refresh on here. Okay, it switched my wallet to a different wallet this time. Let's try paying again. It's checking my balance. I should have a balance. Now it's opening up Phantom most likely. And now I'm gonna sign from my Phantom wallet, the $1.11. And the big question is, will we see the SoundCloud embed that came natively from the template? Or after the payment is confirmed, are we actually gonna see my new YouTube live stream that we're live right now? Are we gonna see that live? Drum roll. We now see I've changed the content to this live stream so that when you pay, you get access to the live stream that I'm filming right now. And so if you want to pay to get access to this live stream, you can go to x402 live-demo.vercel.app/protected. You can make that payment. And then on the other side, you unlock this content. And so if you're Kismet Casa or you're Neutro or you're Música W3, or if you're any artist or creator and you're interested in using internet payments to sell your art, this is an example of how you can accept payments to payment gate your content. As we start to wrap up, what we've talked about in this video is what is x402, from the origins of the HTTP response to the problems of API keys and agents not being able to pay, to standardization and accessibility to anybody globally, the buyers, the sellers, the facilitators. We then went into an official demo of the official demo from x402 as well as Lincoln Murr's new demo for agents. We went into a guide where I showed you how to clone this repository, how to host it on Vercel, how to get a free link so that you can share your store with your friends and your customers. And now I'm going to wrap up with this little bit of enablement. If you were thinking about how you can enable X402 into your apps, now that I've gone through the example and I have a clearer understanding of how the implementation actually works, 2 applications that I want to be updating with X402. The first is inprocess.fun. InProcess is a website. It's an application and a protocol where musicians can upload their art for free. They can sell it for whatever price that they want, and then they can get payments instantly with no middlemen and no fees in between. What's awesome about InProcess is musicians can come here, there's no permission needed, and they can upload and sell their art. It's also a protocol that is open to use. So we've got the protocol and the web interface, but what we don't have is a solid API. And so in the world of AI agents, where there's going to be more and more AI agents that are going to try to buy things, right now, InProcess is not an easy place for an AI agent to try to make a purchase because we don't have an MCP server, we don't have any official tools that agents can use, and we also don't have any APIs or API documentation to show how to use internet native payments with InProcess. What I would like to do is update InProcess to include X402 so that we can sell any artist's work and gate it behind an X402 payment so that when the 402 payment happens, the payment goes directly into the wallet of the artist and the digital collectible is sent straight to the artist's wallet. Or we might even just make it simpler and say these payments are a separate layer. And when you make the payment, you don't actually get the token sent to your wallet. You just get access to the media. And so maybe we decouple the on-chain NFT, the digital collectible, the ERC1155, with the media that is represented in that. And we might use X402 to just show the content, or maybe we do actually fill it in end to end so that once we verify payment, we airdrop the token that was just purchased. But that's one way I plan on enabling X402 payments into the production apps that I'm building. The other place I'm planning on using it is Recoup. Recoup is the application that I have built for an AI agent for the music industry. And so you can go into Recoup and you can create a new artist and manage your artists and have an LLM that has all the information and all the context around the fans, everything that you're posting, all the music that you've been releasing, all of the fans that have interacted with your content. And inside of this, we have pro payments. So we have a subscription tier where you can sign up to get additional services and an elevated level of service. Right now, we're using Stripe for this. And so if I try to sign up, it's going to open up a Stripe payment, a checkout session with Stripe, which is great for the web level. But if you don't want to pay us, you could skip this and use our APIs because we have an open set of APIs. And if you don't want to pay us right now, if you don't want to pay Recoup, you could just go to recoupdocs.vercel.app. You could study our documentation and you could say, screw these guys in their payment. We are going to just use their APIs so that way you could keep using Recoup without paying us any money. I've intentionally avoided adding any sort of API keys in here because I think API keys add unnecessary friction when the first goal of a new startup should be get as much traffic as possible. But one of the downsides of that is we are not necessarily monetizing all the traffic that we're getting. And so what I'm thinking about doing is maybe in addition to or instead of Stripe, adding X402 directly to our API endpoints so that if it makes our payments one level deeper, instead of our payments happening at the web interface using Stripe, if we put it at the API endpoint, it's a double catch. It's two birds, one stone. If you are on the website, the web is also making those API requests, and the web, when it makes that request, can surface up, hey, we need to make those payments. And actually, we can automatically make those payments behind the scenes because of magic that we do with inside of Recoup of having on-chain wallets as well as the Stripe payment information. Additionally, if people try to skip over our Stripe payment or the web-based payments and they go straight to our APIs, using X402 is going to make it so that if you try to query any of these API endpoints, like trying to get all the social posts for an artist, or trying to use the Spotify search API, or try to get all the fans for a specific segment, you're going to get back, hey, X402, you got to make a payment, payment is requested, and then you can make those payments either at the API level or at the web level. And so to summarize, for in process, the value we're going to get is enabling an API layer so that AI agents can have an easier job of purchasing the art that is created on in process. And for recoup, the value add for using X402 is that we make our payments level, instead of at the web level, it's at the API layer. So one layer deeper and a little bit more secure and robust payments, instead of only doing Stripe and making it, you could go around it by going to our API. Now doing it at the API level, at the foundational level, makes it so that payments are enforced at the lowest level, and then they trickle up to the higher levels of web. That has been my deep dive on what is X402, a new standard of payments for the internet. If you have any questions or if you got any value out of this, please give this video a like, give it a repost, leave us a comment down below so that more builders can see exactly what 402 is, how they can start building on it, so we can have more applications and products that are built with the new standard for internet native payments.